On the high ground of the Century 21 Exposition Grounds in Seattle, 5 pure white open arches rise 100 feet above clear waters sprinkled by many fountains. At least the fountains will be going soon, and the pools will be filled. Surrounding this amazingly beautiful courtyard, there is a complex of 6 buildings, all repeating again and again the space-age Gothic motif of the arches. And inside these buildings, there is now taking final shape the most elaborate exhibit on science ever assembled by government or by industry. In fact, the $10 million U.S. science exhibit represents the largest cash outlay ever made for any exhibit based on a single theme. Here, there is well over 250,000 square feet of floor space dedicated to pure science. The whole is far too much to take in one gulp, but our television cameras are here now to bring you a preview glimpse, and we are here to bring you the story of the tremendous efforts that have gone into what many now believe will be the most awe-inspiring feature of the Seattle World's Fair. Looks like quite a climb, doesn't it? Many people get quite heavy-footed right about at this point. Won't you believe it? Although it looked like I was walking uphill, in actuality, I was walking downhill. Hard to believe, you say? Watch this. You see, it was all an illusion. I'm Bill Neilson, and we're here to take you on another tour into the world of tomorrow.
World of Tomorrow, an inside view of Century 21, the Seattle World's Fair. The longer you look at the architecture of the U.S. Science Pavilion at the World's Fair, the more fascinating it becomes. And every time you move to a new vantage point, you get a new perspective. The Science Pavilion was designed by Minoru Yanaski, who used to live in Seattle, along with Seattle architects Cinerama, Bain, Brady, and Johansson. When you look at the structure from the south, at the downtown edge of the fairgrounds, there's something mighty and massive about it. As though rising out of millenniums of accumulated knowledge from man's past, there rises the pure white of science. The contrast in color and texture is accented by the lines of the space Gothic design, perhaps symbolizing the never-ending search for man's new knowledge and understanding of man's environment. Looking at it one way, in the wall panel design, you may see infinity symbols standing on end. The open arches that dominate the area present a lacy effect at the top. In them, you can almost see the crystal structure of a snowflake. But they, like the buildings, are made of precast concrete. And stream rocks, ground smooth by nature's thousands upon thousands of years, are repeated in the floors of all the surrounding pools. The concrete fountains, planters, and wall panels are made with quartz aggregate to give them their gleaming white appearance. It would be hard to imagine a more inspiring setting than this 6.5 acres of pools, gardens, walkways, patios, terraces, and surrounding buildings. Inside the buildings, there are more than 100 exhibits and 3 different theaters, 2 of them quite revolutionary in design. On the outside or the inside, nobody has ever seen anything like this before.
Meet now Dr. Athelstan Spilhaus, the commissioner of the U.S. Pavilion. Dr. Spilhaus, why has the U.S. government seen fit to spend so many millions here?
Well, I think it's a very good investment for 3 reasons. First of all, it'll teach everybody a little bit about science, an appreciation of science, so that they can exercise their responsibilities in the use and hopefully against the misuse of scientific facts. Secondly, I think it may stimulate some youngsters to choose a career in science. And thirdly, I think it'll interest adults, parents of children, so that they will be more understanding when their children choose careers in science different from their own careers.
This is quite an experiment in communication, making these displays understandable to the layman, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's quite a challenge, and of course, we have to make them at all different levels of understanding. We hope that the exhibits are satisfying to a scientist as well as understandable to everybody.
One thing that has impressed all of us in this particular industry is the showmanship that is involved here.
Well, if you want to interest everybody, you've got to interest them in ways that art and music that they already appreciate, and then bring the science in on the side.
There's no doubt that this display, this entire show, will be far more fascinating than anyone ever believed, I'm sure, Doctor.
I hope so.
Thank you, sir.
Good to see you.
You are watching tonight. The Seattle World's Fair is less than 2 weeks away from opening day. As in every other corner of the grounds, there is a sense of urgency here at the science exhibit. But the carefully phased plan is definitely in the final stages. When you come to the Science Pavilion, this will be the first building you enter, after you pass under the arches out in the courtyard. It's called the House of Science, a stand-up theater with screens stretching all the way across one wall. And on the opposite wall, a long projection booth with 7 motion picture projectors and 2 slide projectors. About 750 people will enter the theater every 15 minutes. And here they will see on the multiple screens an introduction to everything that follows. The constantly evolving, growing structure of science is presented as a house of interlocking apartments. And you meet the men who build the house, see how they live and work, even catch a glimpse of the qualities of mind that make a scientist. After this introduction to science, you will move on to a section on natural phenomena, volcanoes, thunder and lightning, and many other things that have always made people ask questions. Perhaps those early scientists said, if I watch closely enough, I can figure this out. But in time, they learned that the senses aren't always reliable. The crooked western town we saw at the start of our telecast is only one of the many illusions you'll see. Your eyes, your ears, even your sense of touch will play tricks on you. When man learned that he couldn't always trust his senses, science began to develop a vast array of instruments, from telescopes to spectroscopes. We are now in building number 2, devoted to the development of science. Here you see not only the tools that helped men find truth beyond the grasp of unreliable senses, you see illustrations and demonstrations of some of the great classical experiments that have built our knowledge of electricity, atoms, heredity, and astronomy. In a later telecast, we'll see more of this story of the development of science. Enough to say now that it ends with views of man's universe that were developed through generations of scientific thought. And so you move on to another spectacular first at the Seattle World's Fair. This is an artist's conception of the route through space you'll travel in the United States Boeing Spacearium. Nothing like it has ever been attempted before. The government provided the building, the Boeing Company provided the Spacearium system. Cinerama is prime contractor on the project. A hemispheric screen, 78 feet in diameter, has been created for this theater, the world's largest movie screen. The production was filmed by the world's largest and widest angle motion picture lens. The Boeing Company said, we want a lens that will do this. There was no such lens in existence, and some thought it could not be done. But Fairchild Camera and Instrument Corporation developed it especially for the Boeing film. The revolutionary lens will be used for projection as well as filming the ride through space. Now the huge screen has been installed in building number 3 at the Science Pavilion. 3,600 aluminum triangles, altogether 8 tons, are suspended from the ceiling. As it's lighted now, you can see in the center of your picture the shadow of the supporting structure that holds the screen above the audience in the Spacearium. Now, if we turn off the overhead lights, you can see that it really is a screen, not just a mesh. On it, the picture is projected all around the audience, a full 360 degrees, and the picture arches over the audience in a 160-degree arc. This cutaway drawing will give you a full view of the whole arrangement. There are handrails for the stand-up audience, and many will feel that they will have to hold on tight during their 12-minute ride. In the center, you see the structure that holds the special projection equipment. With the screen already in place, work is now being completed on installation of the projector and the sound system for your ride through space. The giant lenses have already arrived from California. The entire system will be ready for test runs before the fair opens.
I'd like very much to introduce now Mr. Harold Mansfield, who is a special assistant to the President of Boeing and the director of this World's Fair exhibit. Mr. Mansfield, when did Boeing first get started on this project?
About 2.5 years ago, Bill.
Will you outline some of the significant steps that were taken in the development of this exhibit?
Well, I guess the first problem was to find someone who was willing to undertake it, because like most things of this sort, we had many experts who didn't think it could be done till it was proved.
Who finally took on the project?
The Cinerama Corporation.
I believe one of the members of that corporation is working inside right now.
Perhaps your camera can pick him up. That's Bill Litzwager. He is the technical director, project director for the Spacearium project.
And after you finally decided that it was possible and work began, what happened?
We had to find out a lot about what goes on about 2 billion light years away from here, because that's what this production is made up of. It's a journey, as you know, into really far out space.
I understand that the World's Fair visitors will actually be traveling through space faster than Colonel Glenn.
Oh, somewhat. I think it's about 10 trillion times the speed of light.
It's difficult to imagine, isn't it?
That isn't slow.
You bet it isn't.
It's going to be fun, though.
Certainly will. Thank you, Mr. Mansfield.
Imagine taking off from Earth late one December afternoon and traveling 2 billion light years into outer space. That's the experience that awaits you at the Spacearium. Now let's return to the courtyard outside and show you where we have been so far. First, building number 1, where they are now completing the paneling in the House of Science Theater. Then on through building 2, natural phenomena, illusions, and development of science. Down the back stretch into building 3, the Boeing Spacearium. And after that, you emerge into a rest area with another view of the courtyard and pools. Although the science exhibit is designed for directed traffic flow with 750 persons admitted each 15 minutes, as soon as you reach the lower level in Building 2, there's a chance to linger and browse if you like. Assisting us in this preview visit tonight are some of the 40 young ladies who have been specially trained for work in the U.S. Science Pavilion.
In recent weeks, some of these science demonstrators have been preconditioning a group of 24 pigeons, just a small part of the full cast of animals that will appear in many different exhibits. The pigeons are first taught where and how to get food in these special cages. The girls who work with them keep track of the bird's progress, and the training advances by stages until the pigeons are able to match colors or patterns to choose the right one to get food. Some of the pigeons will have reached more advanced stages of learning when the public demonstrations begin. The girls in the Science Pavilion will perform various other roles in many other exhibits. Selected from more than 300 applicants, the science demonstrators have received an intensive 3-month training course. During the fair, you may see them tracking satellites, adjusting instruments, or conducting experiments using closed-circuit television. In a moment, you'll have a chance to meet one of the demonstrators.
I've been having a very stimulating conversation here with Judy Hanson, who is one of the 40 science demonstrators in the U.S. Science Pavilion. Judy, is Seattle your home?
Yes, it is my home.
How were you selected for your job here at the fair?
It happened that Mrs. Gilmore, who is our supervisor now at the fair, was also a chaperone during Seafair last year, where I met her as a princess. She contacted me in December and asked me if I wanted to work for the World's Fair, and I told her I was certainly very interested.
Needless to say, right?
Right.
What will be your specific job during the fair, Judy?
I'll be working in the modern lab and also with the electron microscope.
Have you been undergoing quite a strenuous training session?
I should say so. Since January 22nd, we've been training.
What have you been learning?
We've been learning basic principles of sciences, including biology, chemistry, physics, bacteriology, just about any science you could think of.
I think at this very moment we're previewing the official uniform for you science demonstrators, are we not?
This is correct.
Will you describe it for us in typical woman talk?
I'd love to. This is a blue sheath with the United States Science Exhibit emblem and U.S. insignia buttons.
And it's a beautiful uniform, and you look very beautiful in it.
Thank you.
What are your plans for after the fair, Judy?
After the fair, I plan to go to Brazil for 2 months and come back to Seattle and finish my education.
Well, the very best of luck to you during the fair and after.
Thank you very
Thanks so much for talking with me.
Okay.
Before we go through Building 4 and methods of science, let's catch up with a few other things we've bypassed. Below the rest area, between the Spacearium and Building 4, steps lead down to a children's area called Junior Laboratory Science. This laboratory for young people will be equipped during the coming week. The experiments have already been tested, and the apparatus and materials are ready. Demonstrators will supervise the area, but youngsters are encouraged to make exciting discoveries for themselves. Another special area is in the lower level of Building 2. Located there is the Science Theater. The U.S. exhibit has brought together the greatest collection of science films ever assembled anywhere. They've come from all over the world. Besides motion picture showings, many distinguished visitors will come to the Science Theater. For example, Dr. Herbert Ollier of Princeton, one of America's great science teachers, will be here from mid-June to September. Anyone with a special interest in science should check the program of events during his fair visit. But now let's go back to our preview tour along the regular route, moving from the rest area into methods of science. This one building is large enough to accommodate 4 jet airliners. And here, anyone could easily spend several hours, not simply examining new and interesting displays, but actually watching work in progress. For this area picks up where development of science left off. It attempts to show how scientists work, and 6 different general fields of study are included. By the time you've moved through all the areas, you will understand that the scientist can work almost anywhere with almost any kind of equipment. Many of the experiments in progress are far from the old-fashioned idea of a laboratory. Asking questions and searching for answers can lead the men of science to many different environments. The development of new tools and techniques never ends. What is science doing now to advance knowledge beyond the great discoveries of the past? That is the subject matter of Area 4. We'll return to explore it in more detail on a later telecast.
Been talking here with Dr. Bidler, who is the science coordinator of the U.S. Science Exhibit. Dr. Bidler, who decided what material would be demonstrated and displayed here in the U.S. Science Exhibit?
Very early in the game, we had a science advisory committee made up of about a dozen eminent scientists from the Washington area decide that we should portray basic science as a theme, and not technology, not medicine, not engineering.
How many people have been actively engaged in putting the project together?
Oh, we've had the support of about 300 scientists from around the country.
Has it been strictly a U.S. project?
Mainly U.S., but we do have exhibits involving foreign participation. Of course, science is international character, and therefore much of the science we show here has a foreign flavor as well as U.S.
It would have been a difficult task, indeed almost impossible to do without the help of U.S. industry as well, wouldn't it?
Yes, they're very interested in basic science also.
What have been your responsibilities since the basic plan was laid out?
Mainly to determine the specific content of exhibits such as this, and to be sure it has correct scientific integrity based upon the opinions of many other outside scientists.
And I would guess to make it understandable to the layman such as myself, correct?
We had a little part in that too, yes.
Well, certainly you're to be commended for the fine job that you've done in the basic planning, you and all of the people who have helped you. Thank you very much, Dr. Bidler.
The history of science itself, a most dramatic story. And one of the achievements of the U.S. exhibit is showing how concepts have developed through the years. The armillary sphere of a 16th century astronomer can be compared with earlier and more modern representations of the universe. You can see the development of atomic theory and progressive stages of discovery in the now fast-moving field of genetics. And what you learn in Building 2 is related to research that's still going on in Building 4. Here you get an exciting panorama of new questions about Earth and space, matter and energy, and living things. The U.S. Science Pavilion will use nearly 10,000 fireflies, hatch 15 dozen eggs a day, use 286 frogs, 100 horseshoe crabs, 14 mice, a half dozen electric fish, several hundred silver salmon, and 4 rhesus monkeys in public demonstrations and experiments. When we return to this building for a later telecast, they'll all be here. After moving through the long Methods of Science building, visitors will go on to Horizons of Science in Building 5. There, in another controlled time segment of presentation, you'll review what has been learned in other areas and have a few minutes to reflect on how science has affected and will affect the lives of all of us. For this conclusion of your visit, you step into a revolving platform which carries you around a tower of science. You are left with one thought and one question. Science can be used by society to enlarge the horizon of all people. How can you contribute to decisions on the future use of science?
Mr. Leonard Netercorn on my right is the design coordinator for the U.S. Science exhibit. Mr. Netercorn, as 0 hour approaches, how's your health?
Perfect. No ulcers yet.
No ulcers. How near completed are you?
I have about 85% of the material on the floor now. About 60% is installed, and the rest of it is undergoing tests now.
What has been your biggest single problem in the overall project?
Well, actually, the biggest problem was the coordination between the scientists and the designers and the fabricators. The designers, of course, had to wait till the scientists had made their final determination what could be shown. Then the designers had to produce the designs so that the fabricators had sufficient time to produce the exhibits to have them installed at opening date.
Tremendous job of coordination, and judging from the tremendous number of boxes that we see coming in here, and crates being uncrated and things, I'd guess that logistics is quite a problem for you.
It was rather a test rather than a problem, because when you consider that you have 50 fabricators all over the country to come in a very short period of time, less than about 10 days, to install this exhibit, it is a terrific test, and I think only the work of many, many people made it possible.
I think there's little question that what we're seeing behind the scenes here rivals in fascination the show that we'll see here after April 21st. It's a tremendous spectacle. Thank you very much, Mr. Netercorn.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
From the time you enter through the white space Gothic arches till you leave on the level just below, you will probably spend between 2 and 3 hours at the U.S. Science exhibit. At least that would be average. And you'll learn more about science than anyone possibly could in a few hours before coming to this World's Fair. The exhibits alone represent a cost of approximately $5 million, plus more than another $1 million for private industry. If the U.S. Science exhibit can take one forward step toward that understanding of giving better communications, it has made a substantial contribution to the future. And one more thing, it's going to be an exciting experience. Really exciting. We'll be back in a minute with a progress report on the World's Fair as a whole.
And a half days to the World's Fair opening, and all exhibitor space is taken. Around the United States Pavilion, numerous futuristic buildings of domestic commerce and industry are ready, and displays are going in. More than 100 American exhibitors are completing their elaborate preparations for the big day. On the other side of the grounds, around the Washington State Coliseum, 59 foreign nations are putting the finishing touches on their exhibits. As pressure mounts, security has been tightened on the grounds. But one corner already looks like fair time is here. In the evening, the Space Needle is open to riders of the monorail, and thousands line up for the elevator to the observation deck in the sky. This foretaste of things to come indicates that World's Fair optimists have been cautious conservatives all the time.
For many months now, Seattleites have been watching with great expectancy the erection of one of the major attractions at the World's Fair, the statuesque Space Needle. To date, however, only a handful of people have had an opportunity to visit the interior. That opportunity will be yours 1 week from tonight on World of Tomorrow.
World of Tomorrow, an inside view of Century 21, the Seattle World's Fair, will return next week at the same time with a complete report on the most publicized structure in the history of the world, Seattle's fantastic Space Needle. this is Martin Tobin saying goodnight from the site of the great World's Fair in Seattle.
Zero hour approaches. A gold and ivory space needle towers in the sky above Seattle, its legs planted firmly in solid hardpan just across the street from America's first high-speed monorail. One of two trains is already here and operating today. Another exciting glimpse of tomorrow that the World's Fair is bringing to Seattle. I'm Bill Neilson, and this is one of the Allweg monorail trains which is just now completing its test runs on the World's Fair line. In the next half hour, you'll have your first monorail ride by television. But first, let me try it out for you. This is another door into the future and the world of tomorrow.
World of Tomorrow. An inside view of Century 21, the Seattle World's Fair.